Hi guys, in this tutorial we are gonna see how to drag and drop image files from your file manager into the browser using JavaScript and the drag and drop API. Let me show you a quick demonstration and then we are going to code the exact same application. Let's see what we have here. We can drag and drop a single file or multiple files. The application only accepts JPEG, PNG or GIF files. If we select a file type other than those, the application will display an error for 5 seconds. Now the drop area is responsive, making it easy to use the code on a mobile screen. Each image has a remove image button, so if you accidentally select the wrong file, you have the option to remove it. The application also gives us the option to choose files using the Choose File button. One last thing to note is that when I drag a file over the drop area, the borders are highlighted, and as soon as I leave the drop zone, the highlight disappears. Okay, we are done with introduction, so let's jump into the code editor and start coding. To code our small application, we need 3 files. An index.html file, which is our home page, a JavaScript file to write the JavaScript code, and a styles.css file to structure our HTML code. As you noticed, I have already typed the CSS code. I will not go through and explain the whole CSS code, but I will return to the file explaining the important stuff when it's needed. Now let's jump to the index file and start coding. Okay, let's create first the drop area. We're going to drag and drop our files inside this div element. Next, I'm going to add 2 paragraphs with instructions to the users. After that, we have the Choose File button, in which we have added the multiple attribute so we can select more than one file. Next, we are going to have an error placeholder so we can display any validation error to the user. And last, we have a div element with a class of preview container. This element will be populated with the selected images regardless of whether we select our images using the Choose File button or drag them into the drop area. Now, we saw in the demo that the drop area is responsive. Actually, it's the preview container that is responsive. Let's see the CSS code for a minute. Let's find the preview container class, and here it is. We display the preview container as grid, and we set the grid template columns property to the repeat function. I know this is not a CSS tutorial, but let me quickly explain how the repeat function works. The repeat function takes 2 arguments. The first argument tells the function how many columns to create, and the second argument specifies the width of each column. In our case, the autofit argument will create columns with a minimum width of 200 pixels up to 100%, depending on the preview container's width. If the width of the preview container doesn't have space for any more columns, the repeat function creates a new row to place them. That is how the whole container gets responsive. You can copy the whole CSS code from our website. I will put a link in the description below. That's all the HTML code that we need. So let's see our drop area in the browser. Let me change tab to our starting project and reload the page. Nice, here is our drop zone. Now we have to go to our JavaScript file to make our drop area to work. The first thing that we do in the JavaScript file is to target the HTML elements we need. So I will target the drop area, the error placeholder, and the preview container. Next, I will define an array with allowed image types. Remember that we only accept JPEG, GIF, or PNG image files in our drop area. Now that we have our global variables set up, we can use the drag and drop API's event listeners to make the drop area active. Let's visit the MDN website and see a list of all available event listeners that the drag and drop API has. The events that we are interested in are the dragenter event, which is triggered when a dragged item enters the drop area, the dragleave event, which fires when a dragged item leaves the drops area, and the drop event, which is fired when we release the dragged files into the drop area. Nice. Now let's go back to the JavaScript file and make use of those events. Okay, we are back in our JavaScript file. Now let's set up our drag and drop events. I'm gonna take the drop area element and I will invoke the addEventListener method. The method takes two arguments. In the first argument, we specify the event that we want to listen for. In our case, it's the dragenter event. And in the second argument, we have an arrow function, so we can do something when the event is triggered. Also, the function has the global event object as an argument. We are going to need the event object to call some of its properties. Inside the function, I will use the event object and I will call the preventDefault method. When we drag an image in a browser, the browser's default action is to open the image and display it to us in a different tab. The preventDefault method prevents that, and so we can handle the files to our needs. Next, I'm going to copy the whole event listener and set up the dragleave event. And again, I will do the same thing for the drop event. Sorry guys, I made a mistake. We actually need the dragover event as well to prevent the browser from opening the images. Let's quickly set it up. Nice. Now we are all set. Now the main event that handles the files is the drop event. Let's see how we can access the files that are being dropped into the drop area by taking a look at the documentation. The drag and drop API has an object named dataTransfer. The dataTransfer object is used to hold the data that is being dragged during a drag and drop operation. Now the dataTransfer object has a property named files, which contains a list of all the files that are being dragged and dropped. Okay, that means that we can access the files using the files property. Nice. Now let's go back to our JavaScript file to make use of the dataTransfer object. Everything will take place inside the drop event, so let's try to access the dragged files. I will use the event object to access the dataTransfer object and then the files property. Let's also log this to the console so we can see this firsthand. I will open the console and drag a few files in the drop zone. Nice. We see in the console a file list that contains the files that we have dragged and dropped. Also we see the name, the size and the type of each file. Okay, that is exactly what we want. So let's continue with our JavaScript code. Let's remove the console.log function and create a variable named fileList which will hold the files. Next, I will perform a check to see if there are files in the file list. If the file list is not empty, I will call the previewFiles function and I will pass in as an argument the file list. The previewFiles function doesn't exist yet, so let's create it. As an argument, I will pass in a variable named files. The files variable has to be an array of files or a file list. The first thing that I'll do inside the function is to check the file types. I will loop through the files, and if there is a file type that is not included in the allowed image types array, I'll make the error element visible and display the text only JPEG, PNG or GIF images are allowed. The error placeholder is hidden by default in the CSS file. That's why we make it visible when there is an error. Next, I will use the setTimeout function because I want to hide the error after 5 seconds. So I will set its display property back to none. And the function will stop here by returning false. Also, we have to hide the error element every time the function runs to clear any previous error. Although it's not necessary because we are hiding the element after 5 seconds, but maybe in the future you decide to remove the setTimeout function. In this way, our code will still work fine. Next, I will loop again through the files and I will create for each file a fileReader object. The fileReader object allows us to read the content of a file. Next, I will call the readAsDataURL method and I will pass in as an argument the image file that we want to read. The readAsDataURL method converts the file into a string of characters that can be easily used from the browser. You can easily say that the readAsDataURL method prepares the file to be displayed. Next, I will check if the browser has finished reading the file using the onloadEventListener. If everything went well, I will create a new image object and I will set its source to the result that the read_as_data_URL method has returned. This will give us the instant preview that we want. Next, I will create a div element. I will give it a class of image container and I will place the image inside that div element. The image container CSS class that we gave the div element exists already in the CSS file, so the style will be applied as soon as the element is created. That goes for every other class we apply to the elements that we create. Next, I will create two more elements, a paragraph element that will display the image name and the remove image button. I will place both elements inside the image container in which we already have the image in. Let's start with a paragraph. I will first create the element. Next, I will set its class to info. Next, I will insert the file name in the paragraph. And last, I will place the paragraph inside the image container. Next, I will create the remove image button. And I will set its class to remove button. Next, I will create another attribute, and that is the onClick event listener. And I will set its value to a function named removeImage. As an argument, I will say this.parent element. This will target the whole image container and all the elements that we placed inside, including the remove button. So that means that every time we click on the remove button, we have access to the image container element and thus we can remove it. Hope it makes sense. Next, I'm going to display the button's text and place it inside the image container as well. And last, we take the image container and place it in our preview container that we already have in our HTML code. And we are done with the preview files function. Now let's write the remove image function. I will say function remove image, and as an argument I will pass in a variable named element. We know that the element variable is holding the image container. So to remove it, we are going to say element.remove. That's it. Now we're almost done. There is one thing that we have to do, and that is adding the highlight to the drop area's borders. In the CSS file, I have a class named highlight combined with a drop area. We are going to use the highlight class to achieve the highlight. So I will go to our first event, which is the dragenter event, and I will add the highlight class to the drop area. Next, in the dragleave event, I will remove the highlight class. Next, in the dragover event, I will add the highlight class again. And I will remove the class when the drop event occurs. And that's it. We are done with the JavaScript. Let's see in the browser if our drag and drop operation works. Let's select a few files. So far, so good. Let's drag over a non-valid file. Nice, we see the error message which will disappear in 5 seconds. Nice, let's test the remove button. And it works. Everything works fine except the choose file button. Now I'm going to show you how easy it is to implement this action, but I think you have already guessed what I'm going to do. I will go to the HTML code and I will assign a non-change event listener to the input element. And I will set it equal to the preview files function. As an argument, I will say this.files. This will give me access to the selected files. And that's it. The previous files function will run every time we select files and preview them inside the preview container. Let's run a final test. And nice, everything is working fine. And we are done with our drag and drop application. Now I have another video for you, in which you will learn how to do a proper image validation on the server using PHP. Don't miss it. And that's it for today, guys. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like. See you in the next one.